Your sister deserves it more, my dad said when I blew him away with a fancy trip to Greece for his retirement. So I smiled and agreed, making sure their dream vacation turned into the craziest mess they would never forget. Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be the guy sharing this, but let's just say my family trip gift turned into something none of us saw coming. It started as a sweet retirement surprise for my dad, but when they decided to swap me out for my sister, I figured it was my turn to show them what being taken for granted really feels like. Hang tight. This tale's filled with family drama, a bit of karma, and the most tranquil cup of coffee I've had in my life. I'm Greg, 31, a dude working as a doctor in San Francisco. I'd been cooking up this Greece getaway for 6 months, not for me, but for my dad. The guy was finally retiring after 40 years in construction. I thought he deserved something big, not some lame watch or a best dad ever plaque. I wanted him to see the world, the blue rooftops, the Santorini sunsets, the food, the ocean breeze, all the luxury vibes, flights, a swanky hotel, a cliffside suite with a private pool, tours, a private driver, a local guide, fancy dinners, all under my name. The plan was simple. Surprise my parents at the airport, hand them their tickets, and let them know their son had officially outdone every Hallmark commercial out there. I got to the San Francisco airport early, holding this little sign that said, "Welcome to your retirement gift." Yeah, a bit cheesy, but it felt right. They were coming in from Denver, and I hadn't seen them in nearly a year. Honestly, I was pumped. Their flight landed, people started pouring out, and then I spotted them. Mom in her beige cardigan, Dad strutting like he still owned every job site he'd ever worked on. But right behind them came something that gave me a chill. Jessica. They'd just flown in from Denver, and the Greece flight was set for early Saturday morning. The plan was for them to crash at my place overnight before the big send-off. My 37-year-old sister. The same Jessica, still living in my parents' basement, still sorting out her life, still complaining about back pain from gaming too much. She was rolling in with a pink suitcase the size of a fridge, waving like this was her celebration. "Hey, Greg," Dad called out, grinning. "Surprise." Surprise?" I forced a smile. "What's she doing here?" Mom wouldn't meet my gaze. Jessica smirked and said, "Oh, didn't Dad tell you?" Dad laughed like he had the best news. "Your sister needed some fresh air, so she's taking your spot. You don't mind, right?" I stared at him as my little welcome sign started drooping in my hand. My spot. "Yeah," he said, patting my shoulder like it was no biggie. "You know how much Jessica's been through lately. We thought this trip would help her recharge." Recharge? That hit me like an awful punchline. Jessica spends most days lying around with a controller in hand. What exactly was she recharging? Her Wi-Fi. I smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. Nice? I didn't know my gift came with a replace the giver option. Dad laughed again, totally missing the sarcasm. "You're always so funny." Funny wasn't what I felt inside. It was more like, "Really? You're doing this again?" But I'd figured out long ago not to show that. You give them an inch of emotion, and they'll turn it into guilt or pity for Jessica. So I just stood there, calm and collected, watching my parents fuss over her like she'd just come back from war. Mom gave me that nervous half-smile she always wore during these moments, like she knew it was wrong but didn't have the guts to call it out. "We thought you'd understand," she said softly. "You're always so busy with work anyway. You're successful, so you don't get to have feelings." Jessica yawned and chimed in, "Don't be mad, Greg. You wouldn't even enjoy all the walking and sun anyway." I looked at her gigantic suitcase, then at her. "Wouldn't want to interrupt your busy rest schedule?" Her smirk twitched for a second, and that alone gave me a bit of satisfaction. Dad clapped his hands. "Well, let's get moving, Greg. You got the car, right?" Of course I did. I rented a black SUV just for this. The irony of driving them to the luxury getaway I paid for wasn't lost on me. Jessica hopped into the front seat without asking, scrolling through her phone like she owned the place. Mom sat in the back, quiet, avoiding any eye contact. I wasn't mad in a shouting way. I'd passed that stage years ago. I was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes when you finally decide you're done being the family's safety net. When we rolled into my driveway, Dad stretched his arms and said, "You always have the best place, son. You should be proud." "I am," I said, "especially since I worked for it." He laughed, thinking I cracked another joke. As they unloaded their bags, I caught Jessica's phone pointed at herself. "Leaving for Greece. Can't wait for the beaches," she said to her 4 followers. I stood there, hands in my pockets, watching her post a trip she didn't earn, with money that wasn't hers, on a vacation that wasn't meant for her at all. And as silly as it sounds, I smiled. Because right then, as she posed in front of my car, I realized something. They may have replaced me for the trip, but I still held all the reservations, and that meant the game wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. I unlocked my place and started hauling luggage. Funny how fast people turn into help-yourself tourists when someone else is covering the costs. I dropped a suitcase in the guest room, another by the bathroom, and tried not to make a face when Jessica tossed a comforter on the couch like she'd claimed the best spot. "Your place is so cute, Greg," Mom said, nodding. "So proud of you." Dad clapped me on the shoulder. "You did good, son. This will be great for Jessica." "Yeah," I said. "Glad you think so." I kept my voice light because yelling at 60 isn't worthy, and tempting them for a scene would just make it more dramatic. There's a difference between punishment and spectacle. I wanted results, not noise. "You know Greg did all this, right?" Dad said, smiling like he'd built the itinerary himself. Jessica laughed, loud and self-satisfied. "He's such a sweet brother." She looked at me like she expected confetti to rain down on her. I smiled and played along. Sarcasm is a handy tool, dull enough that most don't notice the sharp edge. "Yeah, I did the hard part. Picking the restaurants with comfy chairs," I said. Nobody caught the jab. After dinner, I excused myself. I had a late-night meeting with my laptop, which was true in the sense that I was meeting whatever version of justice I could drum up from a chair and a Wi-Fi connection. My travel account had been my little thing for months. Every confirmation, every payment, every special request was sitting there under my profile. That's the plan. When you're the account holder, you pull the strings. And tonight, I plan to cut a few. I logged in, the dashboard loading with that soft blue from the travel site I used. The Greece itinerary was right there. Outbound flight, return flight, 3 hotels, 2 private transfers, a winery tour, a local guide for 2 days. All paid, all pretty. My fingers worked in silence like a doctor at work. First, the hotels. I clicked into each reservation, hit cancel, and confirmed. The system asked about refunds. Some suppliers had non-refundable rates, but would give partial credits. Fine. I didn't want them refunded. I wanted the illusion I let some charges stay as credit in my account, so if they glanced at it, it still looked real. Next, private driver, gone. The tour operator, canceled. I left a few small fees linked, little financial breadcrumbs just to fluff the look of legitimacy on the PDFs I plan to create later. No fraud, no fake documents, just a bunch of administrative clicks from the one in charge, the airline. That was my knife. I'd booked the outbound/return as separate one-ways, so dropping the return was easy. 1 click. The system asked me to confirm. "Are you sure?" It said like some conscience in code. I hit confirm and the cancellation showed. While processing, I saved screenshots of each cancellation notice. I copied old booking confirmations too, the ones still showing the hotel name, the guide's email, the transfer code. Those originals would come in handy as props. Folks glance at a printout and think it's gospel. The next day, I planned to hand them those props. They'd never know how they strayed. Then I printed, formatted the pages to look official. Headers, dates, little logos. Nothing forged, just screenshots and old confirmations that would convince anyone in a hurry. I slipped them into a clean white envelope and wrote in neat letters, "Open when you land, just one more touch." In my desk drawer, I found an old expired company card. Nothing active, just a relic. I slipped it into a small leather holder with a note saying, "Backup card. If you need it, treat yourselves." I knew it wouldn't work for a cent, but it looked the part. I didn't want to scam anyone. I just wanted them to feel that sting of expectation. Then reality hit. I tucked the envelope into a drawer, planned to grab it in the morning, checked the locks on the doors, and turned off the living room light. I hit the bed with steady breathing I'd used on late nights at work. "Bon voyage, freeloaders," I murmured into the dark. The plan was set. The next day I'd give them their tickets, and they'd waltz right into it, smiling, excited, and totally convinced they had the world handed to them. Morning came, bright and annoyingly cheerful. Saturday flight day, I got up early and leaned into the role of the good son. If I was pulling this off, it had to look genuine. I whipped up breakfast, the whole shebang. The smell filled the kitchen, and by the time Mom walked in, I was halfway through plating. "Wow, someone's up early," she said, surprised. "Big day," I replied, flipping an omelet. "Can't have grease on an empty stomach." Dad walked in, rubbing his eyes and grinning. "You're spoiling us." "Yeah," I said. "That's the plan." Jessica appeared last, still in pajama pants and clutching her phone like it was glued to her hand. "You didn't make oat milk lattes?" I handed her a mug of black coffee. "It's organic," I said. She made a face, plopped down, and I carried their luggage outside. The morning fog was lifting off the city, humming to life. Just as I shut the trunk of the SUV, my neighbor, Mrs. Lanson, strolled out with her tiny dog. She smiled at the sight of the bags. "Heading somewhere exciting?" she asked. Dad puffed up immediately. "Our son planned a Greece trip for us. Retirement celebration." Mrs. Lanson clapped her hands. "How wonderful." "Greece. What a good son you have." I grinned. "Oh, they're going to love every second of it." We piled into the car. The drive to the airport breezy with light Saturday morning traffic. Jessica talked nonstop about restaurants she had to visit, souvenirs to buy, and what pictures would get the most likes. Mom asked if everything was confirmed. "Every last thing," I said, and it was, just not how they thought. At the terminal, I parked and started unloading. A porter came over and Dad tipped him like he was already on vacation. I kept the envelope in my jacket pocket, which had their printed confirmations, and the expired card tucked neatly inside. Inside the terminal, Jessica complained about the check-in line. "Can't you just do that priority thing?" she asked. "I'll handle it," I said, heading to the kiosk. I was still the booking holder, so the check-in system let me print their boarding passes and luggage tags. While I worked, Jessica argued with a staff member about her carry-on size. When finally our turn came at the counter to drop off bags, the airline agent smiled. "Heading to Athens, right?" Dad nodded enthusiastically. "That's right. My son set up everything. Private driver, hotel on the cliffs." The agent started typing, then looked up. "Where are you staying? Do you have a hotel reservation?" I jumped in quickly. "Oh, it's through a local company. I booked it direct. Way better rates that way." I laughed lightly, and she nodded, relieved not to pursue details. "Got it," she said, printing luggage receipts. Crisis averted. I glanced at Dad, who was too busy on his phone to notice anything. After security, we stopped at the entrance to the gates. It was the usual pre-flight goodbye scene. Mom checking her purse for the 10th time. Dad patting his pockets. Jessica snapping another photo. I pulled out the white envelope. "Here," I said, handing it to Mom. "Open it when you land." She smiled. "What's this?" "Just confirmations and a little something extra." I looked at Jessica. "Everything's prepaid, but just in case you spot something nice, that card's loaded. Treat yourselves." Her eyes widened. "Seriously?" "Yeah," I said, straight-faced. "Consider it pocket money." Mom looked touched. "You didn't have to." Dad interrupted. "He's always thinking ahead. That's my boy." Jessica slipped the envelope into her tote like it was gold. "I'm going to buy something designer," she said. "I'm sure you will," I replied. Their flight was boarding soon, so they headed for the gate. Jessica gave me that smug smile, the kind that always got under my skin growing up. "Try not to miss us too much, little bro," I smiled back, not in the slightest. I walked back through the terminal feeling lighter than I had in years. The drive home was calm. The city looked different when you weren't the one always giving. When I parked in my driveway, the house felt quiet in the best way. I poured myself another coffee, settled on the couch, and finally let out a breath. They were 35,000 feet in the air, smiling, thinking they were living my generosity. And I was home free, enjoying the first vacation that actually belonged to me. That peace lasted almost a full day, just long enough for them to cross the ocean and time zones. By the next morning, my phone started buzzing nonstop across the counter. Mom, then Dad, then Jessica. One after another, like an alarm I had no idea I set. I let it ring. Then a few minutes later, a text popped up from Dad. "We're here, but there's a problem with the driver. Call." Me. I grinned. "Problem with the driver?" That sounded like the opening act. I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, another text. "No one showed up. We've been waiting over an hour. Please check." Then came the first voicemail. I hit play, just wanting to hear his tone. "Hey son, not sure what's going on. The driver never came. Can you reach out to the agency and see what's happening?" He sounded calm, hopeful even, the kind of calm that wasn't going to last. Then another came in. Mom this time. "Sweetheart, the hotel said they can't find our reservation. Maybe it's under your name." That made me laugh out loud. It was under my name, all right, just not active anymore. I flipped the phone face down and started a load of laundry. By the time I came back, I had 7 new voicemails and a bunch of text messages. I played the next one on speaker while folding a towel. It was Dad again, voice tighter now. "Greg, the hotel says the booking was canceled weeks ago. They're saying we need to make a new one. Call me back immediately." I didn't. Then came Jessica's first message. Voice note, of course. "What is wrong with you? The tours are invalid. The driver's number doesn't work, and the airline says our return flight isn't even booked anymore." "Are you kidding me, Greg?" I paused, folding to chuckle. "Guess they found out about the return tickets," I muttered to myself. More messages rolled in one after another. "We're trying to reach the tour company. All canceled. Do you know how embarrassing this is? You're paying for this, Greg." I poured another coffee. The more they panicked, the calmer I felt. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was just quiet relief, watching all the pressure I used to carry land where it belonged. A few hours later, another text from Mom. "We had to book an Airbnb. It's not great. Please call us." Attached was a photo. I opened it. They were standing in front of what looked like an ancient yellow apartment door with peeling paint. The caption read, "This is all we could find." Jessica's face in that photo was priceless. Wrinkled nose, hand on her hip, sunglasses crooked. I scrolled down to another message, furious this time. "Your stupid card doesn't work. It got declined at dinner. Did you actually think this was funny?" I took a sip of coffee, smirking. "Oh, I did," I whispered. Then Dad again. Voicemail 14, still trying to sound authoritative. "I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to fix this, son. You ruined your mother's trip." "I ruined my own trip the second you swapped the guest list," I said calmly. For a second, nobody spoke. Even Jessica froze. Dad's face twisted like I slapped him. "You think you're clever, huh? We raised an ungrateful child." "Yeah," I said. "You raised 2 kids. Actually, you just never stopped raising one of them." Jessica gasped. "Oh my God, you're unbelievable." "Thanks," I said. "Now, unless one of you needs medical care, this is my workplace, and I'd appreciate you leaving before I call security." That broke the quiet. They spun around and stormed out, Jessica muttering something about exposing me online. The hallway door slammed so hard the frame shook. My nurse poked her head in a second later, eyes wide. "Was that your family?" "Unfortunately," I said, taking another sip, "but they're discharged now." By the afternoon, the smear campaign began. It kicked off with Mom posting long, teary paragraphs about how their own son ruined their lives, how they were humiliated and broke, and how kindness was repaid with cruelty. Then Dad jumped in, calling every relative he could reach to tell the Grease story, but with a twist. In his version, I'd hacked their trip, stolen their money, and laughed while they suffered abroad. By Friday, my phone lit up with messages from cousins, aunts, and folks I hadn't heard from in ages. "You went too far, Greg. They're your parents. Show some respect. Everyone makes mistakes. You should have forgiven them." One relative even texted, "You're lucky Grandpa doesn't hear about this. He'd lose it." I grinned. "Perfect," I mumbled. Exactly who I wanted to hear about it. Sure enough, 2 days later, Grandpa called. Now, my grandpa's not a man who wastes words. Retired military, sharp as ever. The kind of guy who can silence a room just by exhaling. He said, "I've been getting calls all week about you and your parents. I'm done hearing both sides secondhand. We're having dinner tomorrow night. Everyone's coming. We'll settle this like adults." I could hear the clinking of his old pocket watch chain over the phone. It was the sound of finality. "Sure," I said. "Tell everyone I'll be there." He paused. "You're not going to start yelling, are you?" "No, Grandpa," I said, smiling. "I'm bringing receipts, not a megaphone." He chuckled. "Once. That's my boy." When I hung up, I stared at my calendar. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m., the grand showdown. Part of me felt exhausted already. Another part felt ready. I wasn't going to explain, beg, or justify anything. I didn't need to. They wanted an audience? Fine. Let them have one. I spent that night combing through my files. The travel receipts, booking confirmations, the email trails. Every single thing was organized and printed. I wasn't there to argue. I was there to end the noise. Permanently. Before I left work the next day, I told my receptionist, "If anyone calls claiming to be my mother again, tell them I'm in. Busy for the next 10 years. She laughed, thinking I was joking. That evening, I drove across town to Grandpa's place, the same one that used to host every Thanksgiving when I was a kid. As I parked outside, I could see silhouettes through the window. Mom pacing, Dad animatedly talking, Jessica scrolling on her phone like it was a shield. Grandpa sat at the head of the dining table, quiet, unmoving. I took a deep breath, straightened my jacket, and headed toward the door. On any other night, this would have been just another normal family dinner. But tonight? Tonight was about me not being the family's scapegoat anymore, and showing what boundaries look like. I rang the doorbell once. Grandpa opened it himself, expression unreadable. "Glad you came," he said. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied as I stepped inside. The air was thick, tension almost physical. Everyone turned toward me. This wasn't going to be a fight. It was a reckoning. The whole family was gathered around the table like a court hearing. Grandpa sat at the head, his expression saying one wrong word, and you're done. Mom sat beside Dad, nervously whispering. Jessica scrolled through her phone, pretending she didn't care. I sat across from them, hands folded, calm as a surgeon before a procedure. Grandpa cleared his throat. The chatter died instantly. "Well," he said slowly, looking straight at me, "I've heard the stories. You stranded your parents in a foreign country, left them broke, humiliated, and, well, furious." He leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Is that true?" I met his stare, mostly his brow furrowed. "Greg, that's not how family treats family. You went too far." I didn't flinch. They went first. He raised an eyebrow. "Explain." So I did. I told him everything, but not emotionally, just facts, calm and measured. How I had been helping them with bills since my 20s. How I paid for repairs, birthdays, flights, and emergencies that somehow constantly benefited Jessica. I described how I planned the Greece trip, a retirement gift meant to celebrate Dad's hard work, how I saved, booked everything under my account, and wanted to make them proud. Then I laid out how it all crashed before it even started. How they replaced me without a second thought. Dad showed up at the airport with Jessica instead of me, I said evenly. Told me she needed fresh air. that I wouldn't mind giving up my spot like it was nothing, like I didn't exist. Jessica rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, you're exaggerating." I looked at her. "You took my seat on a trip I paid for, Jessica." The room went silent. Even Grandpa didn't jump in. I continued. "You all humiliated me that day, not by taking the trip, but by proving I never really mattered to this family unless I was paying for something." Mom whispered, "That's not fair." "It's accurate," I said. "You've enabled her for years. Every mistake, every failure. She never faced consequences. I worked my entire life, and you rewarded her laziness by taking my place. So yeah, I let you go to Greece. I just made sure it matched what you gave me. Nothing." Grandpa's expression hardened. He sat back, arms crossed. "We made a mistake," Dad said, voice rising. "But what you did was cruel, Greg." "You stranded me in my own family," I said. "You just finally got a taste of it." Jessica slammed her phone down. "This is ridiculous. You're all acting like I'm the villain because I wanted to travel. You're so dramatic." Grandpa turned to her slowly. "Jessica, be quiet." She froze. Grandpa rarely raised his voice, but when he did, the air shifted. He looked at her the way only an old man who's run out of patience can. "You're 37 years old, still living off your parents, and you've got the nerve to act entitled to others' work? Your brother gave your father the gift of a lifetime, and you take it because you needed fresh air. Shameful." Jessica's jaw dropped. "You're taking his side." "His side is the only one that makes sense," Grandpa said. "Your parents enabled this, and now they're crying about consequences." Dad started. "We didn't." Grandpa slammed his hand on the table, making the plates rattle. "Enough! You two raised one child to work for everything and another to expect everything. You took from the wrong one." This time the room went dead silent. He turned to me. "Greg, you got receipts?" I nodded and slid the folder across the table. "Everything. Flights, hotels, refunds. I didn't make a penny from it. Just deleted their comfort." Grandpa skimmed a few pages and then looked back at Mom and Dad. "You're going to pay 'em back. Every cent, every booking, every fee." I clarified that most of the big charges were already refunded or credited back to me. What they owed was just the non-refundable stuff and the hassle they created. Dad's eyes widened. "Dad, come on, we can't afford—" "You should have thought about that before stealing from him," Grandpa cut in. Mom's lip trembled. "We didn't steal, we just—" "You took his gift and gave it away," Grandpa said coldly. "If that's not stealing, it's something worse." Jessica crossed her arms. "I'm not paying him anything." Grandpa turned to her. "You don't have to. You're done. No more help from this family. No money, no excuses. You want to live like an adult? Start acting like one." Jessica jumped from her chair. "You're all toxic, every one of you." Grandpa's voice boomed. "Sit down." She froze mid-step, eyes wide. He pointed to the door. "Actually, forget it. Go. You've said enough." She stormed out, slamming the front door so hard the windows shook. Mom started crying softly. Dad stared down at his plate, speechless. Grandpa stood still, calm. "You two owe your son an apology, right now." It took them a moment, but they did. Dad's voice cracked. "Greg, we're sorry. You didn't deserve that." Mom nodded through tears. "You've always been good to us. We just didn't see it." I nodded. "I know." We ate in silence after that. The food was cold, the air thick. When it finally ended, Grandpa walked me to the door on the porch. He handed me my folder back. "You handled yourself like a man," he said quietly. "You didn't yell. You didn't throw punches. You showed them the truth. That's more powerful than anything." I nodded, smiling faintly. They needed that. He nodded back. They did. But don't carry their mistakes any longer. You did your part. I thanked him and walked to my car. The night air was cool, the streetlights humming softly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the outsider in my own family. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror at Grandpa's house fading behind me. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was closure. At the end of the day, I'm still asking myself the same thing. Was this justified payback, or did I let resentment turn me into the villain of the story? What would you have done? Drop a comment and hit the like button. It helps more than you think. And for more real travel stories with twists like this, subscribe to Travel Safety Tips and stay with us. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.